Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmak Business Channel. And I'm very honored and thrilled to have a distinguished guest on our show today. His name is Kevin Cottam, and he is joining us from Portugal. He is the CEO of Go Nomading PTE Limited, headquartered in Singapore, but truly a global company. Kevin has been helping a lot of senior executives with their life journey as well as their professional journey. And today we have a very important subject to discuss, which is about the commonalities and why we should not look at differences but rather focus on commonalities. So, without further ado, let me welcome Kevin for this discussion. Welcome to Akulmak Business Channel. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Chandra. Thanks so much for being here again and inviting me to be here together. I really enjoy our experiences and our conversations are always good.
Absolutely, Kevin. I think pleasure is mine. And today you're joining us from Portugal, and we have a very interesting discussion lined up around the differences and the commonalities. So, what is what do you feel about commonalities among people, and where people go wrong in terms of understanding each other? Your opening comments, Kevin.
Yeah, I think that a personal opinion, and when we look at a variety of different aspects, whether you look at negotiation, when you look at diversity, you look at all sorts of meetings and these political aspects, and we look at also organizations, is that often the challenge is, and it starts off with the differences. And by looking at the differences, we don't get to the commonalities very well, and it takes a longer time. I believe that we should start looking at the commonalities of a negotiation or even in any type of relationship first before we start looking at all of the differences. Because what the differences tend to do, they tend to separate us. And therefore we get standing in our own ground. And then we can start to have this problem. But we can also look at differences as looking at them as an opportunity to find the commonality. And I think that is probably the understanding that I believe is important, is that within differences, we can find the opportunity for success in the conversation, in any type of negotiation, anytime. But let's talk about the commonalities first. And commonalities are about really developing that relationship. The commonalities, we look at what is common to both parties or to a group of parties or whether it's stakeholders. What is the commonality? And I'll have an example of that. So when I was doing my research for my book, The Nomadic Mindset, Never Settle for Too Long, I spent time with nomadic cultures in Mongolia, the Maasai in Kenya, and also the Berbers in southern Morocco and in the Sahara. And when I was in the Sahara, I was looking for a tent or a small building, a home, which my team and I could go and spend some time interviewing because I was researching. So we found one. And of course, what happens is the master invites you into the house after you've given the gifts and you've done the head shake to, Bob, to invite them into the hello and the welcome. And then we went in. But in Morocco, many of you may not know, but the tea ceremony is extremely important. As in India, there is a tea ceremony. As in England, there's a tea ceremony. In China, there's a tea ceremony. Japan as well. And these tea ceremonies are for a good reason. And those good reasons is they are developing rapport. They are developing information, gathering information on a subject, a person, a whole different matter. So we are gathering, we are developing that respect for each other. And then, which is hopefully leading to trust in each other, which we then can go into further. But in that, we are looking at what are the commonalities? What are the possibilities? And who are you? And This is something that we tend to rush today. We are all about speed today, and we forget about the commonalities or developing the rapport in a very, very good way. But developing rapport can have an incredible, long-lasting effect because you are getting to the core of you as well, not just the outer onion. You're getting to the inner onion of who you are, who the other person is, who the stakeholders, who whatever the business is. So this is developing the commonality. Now, so what happened was in this particular fun experience, we had 3 cups of tea. And my guide, who was speaking Arabic to the owner or to the master tea maker, he was going through conversation and I was watching back and forth and I was wondering, what are they talking about? And then after the 3rd cup of tea, my guide turned to me and he said, you can now ask your questions. I go, well, something startled me, like, why now? What's different now than was before? And so I started to ask the questions. And what was very, very wonderful to me and quite shocking in some ways is that the master asked me a question, which often they did not ask questions. He said, because he found out from the guide, I had been in Mongolia, I had been with the Maasai, I had learned about different nomadic cultures. And so that built the trust that I was open and I was not somebody foreign that was just going to take something from them. The risk was less. So anyway, he asked me, what are the similarities between us? I was taken aback. I had to pause for a moment because he didn't ask me about what were the differences between all of these nomadic cultures. He asked me, what are the similarities? And I said to him, at the base of all of you is your humanity is exactly the same. Doesn't matter where you were in the world, the geographical patterns, the architecture, your religions, your language, your cultures. It was the basis of your humanity. And if we take humanity, which it sounds very large, but it's actually very simple. We're all humans and we're all beings. And how are we common? And that's what we like to know. Not so much about getting into the differences right away, because that starts to push us back. We get on our hind horses, as I was saying earlier. But then I think, okay, so I was very surprised, but I thought this is important. And then today, I was actually, or just recently, I was asked, I had something come to my email, and they were talking about, oh, this is Pride Month, and we're talking about differences. Let's talk about the differences. And I went, no, let's not talk about the differences. Why? So I said, why don't we talk about the similarities or commonalities first? And they went, oh, what a great idea. I mean, how often do we forget about that? Chandra, I'm sure that we all forget about looking at what are the similarities or the commonalities between all of us. What do we want? What's important to us? What do you think?
Well, Kevin, I'm very impressed with your story. First of all, the chieftain whom you're talking about had the wisdom, even though he was in a far-flung area, in a remote area, but he had the wisdom to first talk about the commonalities and not talk about, hey, the color of the skin or what is your culture or what God you worship. These are the common questions which comes to everybody's mind. But I am quite impressed with your story, especially this person whom you referred to. I think even though he was in a very remote area, I think he was very intelligent man. Because if you look at the urban population today of any large city in the world, people don't have these questions on their mind. They are thinking about the differences most of the time. So my second question would be how we can overcome this feeling of first not looking at the differences between people. Even my neighbors, there are a lot of differences which are bound to happen because we are two different individuals, even within the family. How we can focus as a common as focus on the common elements which will bind us together, which will create more opportunity to work together. Is there a formula around it from your experience, if you can tell us?
I mean, again, it's one of those things that you come back to human nature is what is simple. We're thinking of the complexity. How do we deal with all of this? Right? I mean, it's first of all, as I said, the word rapport. It's a development of getting to know each other. Sure, you've known your neighbor for a long time and you've built up some differences, perhaps, and things like that. And however, there's something very common about you, that your beings are next door to each other. You have these things, but look at that first and explore that. Is the relationship? Even if you don't want a relationship, it doesn't matter. You're always in a relationship, some sort of relationship. It might be good, it might be negative, but it's still a relationship of some sort. We are relating to others in some way, and so it starts from rapport. It starts about having that coffee, that tea. It's about finding out about each other. The other thing that I found out from not only Abdul and my other Mohammed, who were my guide, I asked, well, why do you do this? They said, well, the more information you gather is the greater safety for the road. How impressive is that? Safety for the road. They're talking about caravan. They're talking about going, nomading, if they go out and find new pastures. It's the same thing. You can relate it to our human way of being. It is about our commonality, is about the safety for the road. We want to make sure that our relationship has its own sort of safety, so that we don't, and it's going to get a bit rough at times. It's going to get messy, just like in teams, for example. You can set the agreements and how we're going to be together in the commonalities, but something's going to get messy at some point, and we need to be able to deal with that. So we need to always think of contracting in a different way. So in other words, what do I mean by that? I mean, contracting is always by finding a new agreement. If it gets messy, then we need to explore the original agreement. What has changed? What has shifted? But also look at what is common and important to us all. And I think that that's one of the key pieces, is the word important. What do we want as individuals? And often we want from a very rigid position. And the rigidity that we have creates already the difference. Because we need to flow, and we need to accept where that other individual or other teams or other stakeholders or where they are at. We rush because we haven't got time. We've got to transact. And that gets us into differences right away. Because that's the easiest place for us to go to. We're wired that way. But what if we were wired to look at the commonalities first? Great negotiators say that you will never get a negotiation if you start with your differences. It's interesting because I believe this is what Gandhi did. Is that I remember going to, what is this in Delhi, is it the Imperial Hotel, or what is the hotel that he had the discussion with the British?
I think it was Claridge's, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, but I was understood that what he would do, he would always go and prepare himself before, and he would know where everyone was sitting, but he would have an understanding of each of those individuals. And so he would find what is the commonality, but he knew what they were heading for. But he would find a ground first before, and it's the roots of the ground first before you off into the flight. And we need to be grounded. And that grounding comes in the commonalities, not in the differences, unless those differences become the commonalities ultimately. And that is where the opportunity, creating the opportunity for those to become common and resourceful for all of us.
Well, Kevin, you are making a very important point. I mean, let's look at our world today. We have neighbors always fighting. We have India, Pakistan always fighting. We are neighbors. You have US, Mexico fighting. you have Brazil, Argentina fighting, then you have UK, France fighting, China, Japan fighting. We are always fighting with our next door neighbor country. So, well, they are in the same region. They can fix their differences by talking to each other. I think it's a very important point. Don't you think my observation is bang on when I say that there are common things between Mexico and US? They can fix it, but they are not doing that. For what reason? Do you have any opinion on this?
Well, it comes down to, I think in my way of thinking is that it comes down to that big ego. Is the ego has to stand in these type of situations. It's that I'm the better, I'm the best. And already you set up a separation of which were very hard to divide, to come together. And that is what happens, is that getting out of the ego and understanding what does everyone want. Ultimately, it's, you have in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the ego heavily, right? And so consequently, it's about shooting that with an arrow, is that ego. And that is how you're going to be able to remove it, is cracking it. And because that ego puts us in another place, two egos against, which are not necessarily going to come to that place because of the power that is an energy which is between them, and which is forcing them to stay apart. We need to also remember that it is all energy. And what is the energy that you want? You want the energy to flow. You don't want it to go, right? Batting up against each other. Look at the Ukraine war in Russia. Impossible at this particular time, because they have their feet in the ground, stuck, and they will not shift. It's like they're in concrete blocks and they won't move because of their ego, because of past history, because of all sorts of stories that are so far behind. We have moved into, hopefully, but it seems not, into a new world since COVID. COVID has shifted us in many ways, but it has not shifted us as talking about diversity is a separation as opposed to a coming together. Diverse already means apart, right? How do we bring them together? Let us start with the commonalities of, and let's not talk about necessarily diversity as a word, perhaps, is that we look at the situation. It's inclusiveness we need to look at, not diversity. Inclusive brings us together. Organizations, they talk about this now. Oh, we need to have inclusive. We need to work together. But then they talk about diversity, which pulls it apart again. It's like this accordion that goes like this. Whoa, 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 whoa. And center this, as we do in yoga. Center on what it is that brings us the balance, which brings us the commonality, which brings us the stability, which brings us all of those things. And it's all connected to the ground. So I may be moving around in a variety of different thoughts here, but it's the same thing. It is the ego that is making us separated.
No, I think you are bang on. I fully concur with when you say that the ego is not helping us. Actually, it is making us apart. How does this impact our business today, especially in the post-pandemic era, where the boundaries are fallen? We are no longer governed by the country's definition, and more and more people are now collaborating globally. And for the first time, the world is becoming truly a global village in a true sense. So, considering all these changes, which seems to be permanent right now, how does this, basically starting the understanding other people and not really looking at the differences, how professionals of today will be able to leverage this knowledge, your knowledge that you're giving us today, will help us to win more business, to grow in life?
It's a really interesting topic, what you just said, and question. Because the question I look at is, are we really coming together? Are we not setting up more boundaries? The boundaries have not gone. We still have this because we're wired in the past old operating system. We are now seeing that there's a new light happening, which is fantastic. But we are still operating from the old mindset and trying to put the new into the boxes that were old. And that is not everyone, of course, but this is what I watch and I look at, is that we're still talking the same old thing, just put in another packaging. And we need to come to the clarity and understanding amongst all of us that this is the same. We are still putting boundaries up. We're still putting them. But we're lessening the boundaries through digital transformation because we have to, because there doesn't seem to be boxes that this is put into. And that is helping. That has helped us considerably, is this whole world of the digital world. And that has expanded our technology, but also our thinking. But our thinking is lagging behind and always will lag behind because we're humans. And we lag into the past. And our past is driven by how we were brought up. And the past is driven by many, many aspects of the education. And if the education doesn't change us, then what would? Even on the street when you're playing, that has to shift and change as well. There's still antagonism on the streets, you know? It is because we have created this through family, through culture, through religion, through education, all of these. And we're seeing a superficial shift, but the same on the ground is happening. I mean, you just have to look at the ground. How do we shift that? By, first of all, the awareness that that's exactly what's happening. And you know more than I do in that awareness is so extremely important. And because of your history in the spirituality of Hinduism, but also of the Bhagavad Gita, this is such richness of the spirit, of understanding the fullness of an individual. Again, I come back to humanity. All of us want peace. We want to be loved. We want to have our own places. We want to have good health. We want all of these things. But somehow we get sidetracked. And that sidetracking is very fast now. They talk about the speed, and I go crazy. It's like, we're speeding to where? We're rushing to where? Again, more of the same that will come about, which is more differences. What is the answer? Well, there's so many different answers on this particular thing, but personally, we have to accept, we have to look at the commonality. We need to look at and honor the differences and find the opportunities to transform those to commonalities. We need to remove ourselves from the boxes that are in our mind and the old operating systems, which is not easy because humans don't shift and change very fast and transform very fast. And that is the problem, because the digital changes so fast. And that humans can't keep up with that. The youth can, because that's their brainwave. They're brought up on that. And so the hope is in the youth, I believe. And people like you that are constantly in digital world. Chandra, and I'm always respectful of that, very much so. But I don't know if I'm making a statement here, or I don't know if I'm making my point, but I believe that we need to get to the basics. And of course, the basics are across the world, just as Abdul said in that hut. It cut across everything. What are the similarities? This brings the safety for the road, safety for us to do negotiations, safety for our neighbor, safety for everyone else is finding out what works first. But sure, there's going to be stuff that goes messy. I mentioned before, but you deal with it. And we've been dealing with it for years, but maybe we've been dealing with it from too much of the ego. And my way is right, your way is wrong. No, there's always as we say, there's always a 1% truth in everything. But that's a 1%. There's always some things that are true. But we need to be able to look at the whole picture, the vastness. And that's one of the things that I found from nomadic cultures. And just recently, I was in the Azores Islands and sitting there, and all I could see was the horizon of the sea and the sky meeting each other. And that is where we need to go wide. Let's not stay in our narrow. Wide. That'll help us find the commonalities.
Well, that's a very powerful message you have given, but I have one last very difficult question for you. Very
Okay.
Don't you think most of these egos or the blocks we have in our mind or pre-wired, preconceived notions are happening because of the religious ideologies that we follow? I think the first thing we have to do is get rid of the ideologies that we follow, isn't it? So that's a difficult question.
It's a different question, but it's a very powerful question because it's a question which has created many of the wars over the history. Is that we do this in the name of God? You're on God's side and you're not on God's side. Pardon? I never in my whole life been able to figure that one out. But that is where so much of this has become a problem, because in the doctrine. And that's because it's very narrow and it's very controlling, and it's created to control people. And the worst thing is for people, for governments or organizations or religions to not have control, which means somebody has to lose control, which is us. And we think that by the possibilities of the doctrine or the messages, we will gain control. No, but we're controlled under a specific regime thinking. It's not about the individual. So, I was a born-again Christian once upon a time when I was 19. And my father I moved to Australia. My father said to me, he said, if you have problems, go to the church. And I'm an Anglican, so I would say it's not as strong. We were not as strong, and I was not confirmed, and I decided to get confirmed because of what my father was interested in me doing. But I started to learn, and I enjoyed being a born-again Christian. But then all of a sudden, something inside of me said, but so much hypocrisy is here. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing does not match up. And so I decided I'm leaving this because I don't believe it. I believe in the basis of humanity, of what's important, and I'm not seeing it. So I left, and that was my message, was to find myself. I said, I want to find my soul. And that was not going. So I researched all sorts of different aspects, and I eventually came to meditation and followed an Indian tradition. But there was much more strength in the understanding of me being connected to the universe. And I mean, nature, everything. And if you see the situation today, there are problems with, say, for example, the Maasai. The Maasai are more animist, and so they think about the animals, they think of nature, they think about their own gods and their reasons of connection with nature. And there are, of course, pilgrims, and there are Christian pilgrims that are coming in and professing certain things of doctrine. And it's not working. It's working for some, but it's not working for others, because what they're saying is that they have to remove their culture. They have to stop certain things in their culture. And they're very strong to their culture. And they're not hurting anyone by doing that. But the religion is coming in and shifting and tearing them apart. If people want to have religion, I believe it's important for them. I'm not saying against it. But what I'm saying is that know the reason that you're there. What is it that you're searching for? What is it that you can also search within yourself as well? Because the basis of what is being told, the basis is all good. It's just the people who are sharing it are sharing it from their own agenda. You need to be very clear about your own agenda. And it's not about making money off of other people because of your agenda. And so it's a good question, and it's a huge question. And we could debate for years and years and years, and they have been in the past to do this. Bringing it back. It's about the self, it's about the soul, it's about the individual, it's about the awareness, it's about looking at the bigger picture of the humanity, it's about finding how we can be here on this planet together and to make it as robust as possible. And people say, we are, look at the advancements we're doing. And yes, advancements in lieu of what? In lieu of what? We still have, for example, a situation in Tanzania at this point in time of where the Tanzanian government has decided that they want to evict the Maasai of 1,500 square meters or square kilometers off of their ancestral land. Why? Conservation washing is under the auspices of conserving the land, of which they Maasai conserve it better than anyone else. But the reason is they're leasing it to Dubai royals for trophy hunting. This is not respecting our individuals. This is for power, for greed, and money. That is not the commonality. That is the difference of a few that have power. We must look at the commonalities, the humanity, and what is important at the basis, not the surface, the basis. It's like that onion, right? It's that we need to get to the center of the onion, which is the soul, and all the layers on the outside that we keep creating. Wow. So I say, search for the commonalities, take the time to develop rapport, and also to look at how differences can be transformed and looked at as opportunities in a positive way. And then always look wide.
Absolutely, Kevin. In fact, there are very big things happening in our universe, in fact, in the neighborhood, in space, which are much, much bigger than these petty things that the humans keep fighting for. I think your message is very, very loud and clear. There are bigger things happening. There are bigger plan in place. So let's find a common ground so that we can live happily and coexist with each other. Thank you so much for giving this positive message, Kevin.
Thank you very much. And Chandra, always a great time spending with you.
Yes, the pleasure is mine, Kevin, and we will catch up in the next one. For today, I'd like to say goodbye.
Okay, ciao.
Friends, we had a very interesting discussion with Kevin, and he gave us a lot of ideas, tips, and tricks in terms of normalizing our behavior, in terms of becoming more adaptive and accommodative to other people and grow together. If you have any questions and if you want any help from Kevin, do write in. The emails are flashed in this video and also given in the description below. We will make the connection happen. So as always, thanks for watching, and we will meet you in the next edition of Leader's Voice. Until then, bye bye.